We started with this simple message of make good compost and all your problems go away, that microbes can perform a lot of functions that currently are being performed by chemicals. It's a good starting point. It's not a complete starting point. The challenge is very much cultural. We can't expect that suddenly all of the farmers are suddenly just going to start making compost. That's just not going to happen. They're just so busy in the day-to-day that they don't even have the headspace to think about it. And so from a very, very early on, we decided, okay, we're going to actually make it into a product. We're now hitting at economies of scale, plus, they have educated themselves enough to say, okay, well, we can spray it, or we can inject it, or we can coat it as a seed coating, and the seed coating is going to be the cheapest for the greatest effect. We're going down the chain of removing barriers to even starting work with biology.
In this episode, we return to one of my favourite topics, that microscopic life that lives in the soil. After recognising the significance of soil life for supporting the climate, Daniel Tyrkiel set about exploring solutions that could support farmers to support and work with the biology in soil. The desire was to create a plug-and-play solution, something easy and accessible that allows farmers to shift from chemicals to biology without a need for heavy learning or investment. And the outcomes from the creations from his company, Soil Ecology Laboratory, have included world firsts, innovative products which are continually being developed and explored further. It was a pleasure to chat with Daniel and learn about the mindset behind the products and his determination, which seems to have been inspired by his mentor, Dr Elaine Ingham. I'm Helen Fisher. This is We Are Carbon, and I very much share in Daniel's enthusiasm to recognise the significance of the life in soil. Learning about soil life can open our eyes to a new way of seeing the world and help us to identify new solutions. Check the description for some resources shared by Daniel and additional We Are Carbon episodes that can help you to dive deeper into this fascinating topic. Be sure to subscribe to keep up to date. Enjoy the conversation. Hi Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being here and I'm excited to learn more about your work. Could you kick us off with a quick introduction to yourself and then maybe a bit of a background story to Soil Ecology Laboratory?
Sure, thank you very much for having me, Helen. So my name is Daniel Tyrkiel. I'm the director of Soil Ecology Laboratory. And this little lab started because I just wanted to do something with this climate change thingamabob that's happening. That was sparked by just having a daughter 15 years ago. And in the end, it got me to change my career completely. My background is not in agriculture, it's in procurement and engineering. And this is what I tell to every new farmer that I meet, that I'm a recovering townie. So I apologize in advance. And the what we chose actually as our tools, and this is biology, had to do with the fact that my entry towards agriculture started with permaculture, and it's a very broad subject. And if you were to talk to a regular farmer about permaculture, it really makes no sense in the modern setting. But through permaculture, I came across the work of Dr. Elaine Ingham, and her message was very simplistic, meaning make good compost and all your problems go away. And there's a lot of truth in that, and there's a lot of nuance to that as well. But we followed in Elaine's footsteps, and I'm privileged to say that I do treat her as my personal friend. She's been very, very supportive to what we do here, and supportive to my efforts. And so we've been working with compost. The Soil Ecology Laboratory, the core of the work that we've done focuses around compost and around specifically how compost can grow beneficial microbes that can be used in agriculture and horticulture, in agroforestry and forestry, or just your regular garden. So that's the short of the long, I would say.
Fantastic. And it's such an interesting story. I love that you decided, I want to change my career. I think that's a very empowering move. And I don't think that it's unusual for people to change perspective and change the way that they see things when they have children and think, ooh, are we creating a world that we want to leave to them? So I think it would be interesting to talk about that bit a little bit, on the point of view that we don't have to come into farming in the same way that it has always been. Like, it can feel a bit of a block, and we have an issue with young entrants into farming. But, learning about soil is a very interesting first step that is perhaps more available than people realize. So maybe if you could share a few bits about that, of why you chose soil and how accessible it is for people to relearn and get into different angles on working with soil in their life.
Sure. So soil is the largest carbon sink on the planet. Even now, with a lot of degradation and land use change that has happened, especially since the Industrial Revolution, soil still to this day is an annual global sink to the tune of 3 gigatons per year. And so, if you take that in mind, with the goal of slowing down climate change, not being too arrogant here, but with having that sort of goal in mind, soil becomes a tool that you really don't want to ignore. Especially that we know that the practices that we use in very intensive agriculture settings, that's where soil becomes damaged to the point where, and the annual practices actually cause a net release of carbon dioxide rather than a storage. And if agriculture is what supports us, and there's a big chunk of land globally, obviously, that is dedicated to feeding us, if we had a way of using that agricultural land to store that carbon again and do it in a sustainable manner, then we wouldn't have to worry about the expansion of the population. We wouldn't have to worry about the cost of feeding ourselves if we knew how to balance molecules basically on a global scale, because this is what we're trying to do. If we balance out all of the flux of the molecules that we care about, then we'll be able to live as we're living right now, and still have the food that we need in a way that doesn't break the biosphere, so to speak.
Amazing. Yeah, I love this topic, and it's so at the heart of We Are Carbon. That kind of is what We Are Carbon is about, that carbon is plant food. So we don't have to think from that lens of limitation. And it's to me, it's such a powerful message, but also a really, really important message. It threads into the work that so many people do, but it's a difficult thing to get the messaging across on and then access and actually make change. So if we look at carbon going into the soil, it's a fantastic goal. It's a fantastic aim. There's so many benefits of that for thriving. I think I really enjoy the word thriving, rather than just going, we can solve the problems. Actually, we can heal, and we can thrive, and we can be really well nourished by beautiful food. So there's so many things wrapped into the benefits of getting the carbon back into the soil. But it's such a big conversation. And it sounds in and of itself like a simple solution. You work with the biology and the nature, but actually it's a really, really difficult thing. And I'm sure that you have a huge amount of perspective on this, of the knowledge that you've learned and the work that you do, to actually then take that into practice. There's a whole system that you are confronted with of barriers to ensure that on a large scale farming is bringing carbon down. So could you share some of the barriers that you see in terms of getting the knowledge from the lab and into action into the fields?
So the way I see our ability to make change. So we need to start off first of all with do we know how to do this, and what is the mechanism? Have we explored it enough? And the answer is yes. There is enough evidence. There's been enough work in scientific literature, and there's enough calculations of what resources are necessary physically to be able to pull this off. To answer that question positively, we can actually do this. The challenge is very much cultural, in a sense that there is a certain machine in place, and that machine has been built up over decades to ensure that we have food to eat. As simple as that. And that machine is operated by a huge number of players. I mean, if you just think of the simple concept of a supermarket, that's what we all see, right? And a single supermarket will have dozens and dozens of stuff, right? And we've got thousands of them across the country. And, that's the end of the chain. And then, then you need to process that food because a lot of it is processed. So then you're going to have manufacturing there. And then you're going to have middlemen between those manufacturers and the farmers. And you're going to have the farmers supplying the middlemen. And then you're starting to look at, there's a system that the farmer has subscribed to satisfy what the merchant wants. And then to satisfy the system, there's another set of players in the back end before the farmers that enable that system to play its role, so everybody can play their parts. And so, it will be very difficult for all of these players to suddenly change their tune and play a completely different melody, because they would probably need to change some of the instruments. And so, for us to be able to make the necessary changes, we need to shift basically not just the perceptions, but the way of working of a lot of people. And I'm talking about people, I'm not talking about some machine and system here. These are all people. How people actually work on a day-to-day basis, and to ensure that those changes don't upset the cart so much that they simply reject it, because we're not in a wartime situation where the U-boats are preventing oranges from reaching Great Britain. Therefore, we have to pay children to go and collect dog rose fruit to be able to make a syrup so that we have vitamin C for the population, right? That's not the situation that we're in. Climate change is a slow process, and everybody pretty much ignores it on a day-to-day basis. And so, to be able to make necessary changes, we have to speak in the language that everybody's used to, and the language is, I've got this system of working, I've got this equipment, and I've got this budget. And so, if we can look at how people work on many different levels of that system, and tweak it, just a little bit, not beyond a certain scope that just makes them go, yeah, no, I'm not going to even. I've got my system makes money. I can feed my family. I can go on a holiday. It's good. I'm fine. You don't have to come up to me. Another way of obviously making those necessary changes will be to force people, and governments do that, but governments will not simply force people to do things unless there's enough evidence, unless there's also will from the inside of the system, so the population or the industry, to actually say to the government, look, government, we need to change things, how we do things, and then the government might actually move something. And obviously the government might be swayed, obviously, by the lobbyists who just want to stick with the status quo. So the number of moving parts in this whole thing are great. And to be able to change even one player requires quite a lot of thinking and, approach that is human.
Yeah, it's definitely a big challenge, and yeah, really well outlined in terms of the complexity. You decided to take that human angle, to be a human wanting to take a route that would benefit the system and would help with that process of drawing down carbon. So why don't you share a little more about the evolution of Soil Ecology Laboratory and how that is taking a step forward for the people around you?
So again, we started with this simple message of make good compost and all your problems go away. That microbes can perform a lot of functions that currently are being performed by chemicals, and so it's a good starting point. It's not a complete starting point. There's a lot of nuance to that, and so in terms of our evolution, we've always beyond the goals of let's store carbon and let's basically have agriculture without the side effects. And the side effects are many to the environment and to our own health, obviously. So with beyond those goals, the means to achieve those goals, the way I've always seen this was how do we make sure that that we utilize or are being as helpful to the people who are in this as possible. And so our very first trial was to test if the biology does anything. The first question was, well, how do we apply this biology stuff in a physical setting, right? Because then we can do lab experiments, and we decided early on to limit the lab experiments. We do a lot of experiments, but we wanted to go out and test these ideas in the field. And so our very first test, we asked the question, well, how do we do this? We can't really do any seed coating. We can't do any injecting into the soil. So we decided, okay, well, what equipment is available? Everybody's got a sprayer. That's just an example. Okay. It's just a piece of equipment for people who are not in agriculture amongst your audience. It's just a piece of equipment that sprays out a mist of water with some component in it. Usually, it's fungicide or insecticide, and in our case, it was biology, living biology. And everybody's got a sprayer. Okay, well, suddenly the first hurdle is it's not a solution. Our biology is a suspension of particles, of microbes and organic matter of a certain size. And so, to be able now to accommodate the product that we've made, we had to make changes even to the simple sprayer. And so that small change was still doable. It was a matter of buying nozzles that had slightly larger diameter, removing some filters, and just making sure that everything works together. And we tested everything under a microscope, and yada, yada, yada. So the evolution has always been, okay, well, how do we ensure that the people can work with the solution in the first place? And we've noticed from very early on was that this always has been, historically, this working with biology thing has been relegated to a very small number of early adopter farmers. These days, we still call them early adopter farmers, but usually just tinkerers, people who like to do things on their own. They see that, we should be doing this, we should be going in this direction because it's going to be cheaper for the farm, or it's going to be better for ourselves, something to that effect. But if we were to go to a further market, we would need to make it in a way that they can simply use. Nobody's asking a farmer to produce ammonium nitrate. Nobody's asking a farmer to produce urea, which are the basic two synthetic fertilizers. We don't do that because there is a big factory, and that big factory processes a huge amount of raw materials and uses a huge amount of energy to make the products efficient. And then there's a huge distribution chain that simply delivers it to the farm, and there's equipment that the farmer can use that's already been in place. The equipment is usually as old as a farmer, and then they can simply use it, right? So we can't expect that suddenly all of the farmers are suddenly just going to start making compost. That's just not going to happen, because the farmers, and especially the very large farming operations, are so tuned to the current system that they just don't even have the headspace. They're just so busy in the day-to-day that they don't even have the headspace to think about it. So if I was to say to the farmer, okay, well, I'll teach you how to make compost. Okay, how long is that going to take? I can teach you in one day, but you're going to be practicing for 2 years. Okay, and then what? Well, you need equipment. At scale, you need equipment for it. Okay, well, what equipment do I need? Well, you need the turner, or you need that kind of machine or that kind of machine. Okay, well, so that's a purchase. Okay, and then what? Well, then you need to make an extract out of it. And how do I do that? Well, you need some more purchases. Okay, and then what? You see where I'm going with this, right? So all of these steps and equipment and training, those are barriers for anybody who even wants to try this. And so from a very, very early on, we decided, okay, we're going to actually make it into a product. So we made it into a product. It's the only product on the market anywhere in the world that is made to a certain spec, out of compost made to a certain spec. And then we made it. Before even I say that, we made it. And then we started shipping it to farmers. And then we say to them, this is a living product. You have to use it within a week. And then they said, okay, because the weather is coming and I can't use it. And then it's going to spoil. And I just lost my money. I don't need to. I don't need the hassle. Okay. So there's lots of these okays, right? So what we did, we had to accommodate that, and we spent over a year making it shelf stable. I say shelf stable, it means that in chilled conditions we can store it now up to 3 months, and the longest we've actually gone to was a year. But the point is, weather will force the farmer to move about by 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe up to a month, but 3 months is okay. So that means that we've now taken care of anybody who just wanted to try this. We've taken care of 2 years plus and hundreds of thousands probably of pounds worth of equipment at scale, right? If they wanted to really scale this up, even thinking about this, it costs a lot of money. So if they wanted to scale up, we've taken away all of that equipment. Great. So they can now try this because they can now think of the future safely, that they're going to be able to use it. And then we get to the trying point. And how do we apply this? Well, you can do it as a spray, but if we provide it as a product, we're now hitting at economies of scale. Plus, they have educated themselves enough to say, okay, well, we can spray it, or we can inject it, or we can coat it as a seed coating, and the seed coating is going to be the cheapest for the greatest effect. So now farmers are going into the seed coating, but then the farmers are finding that, well, I'm going to buy maybe I'm going to buy a pan mixer and mix it in the pan, and another farmer is going to go and say, well, I'm going to use my auger and put it into the hopper, and they're trying all these different things. And again, it's another barrier. They've got the product now, but now they have to apply it somehow. So then we reached out to a mobile seed coating company, because a client of ours has already been working with them, and they ran a test. They were fine. They did it, and they did the seed coating for the clients. The client drilled that, drilling meaning actually putting the seeds in the ground. And so we had a conversation with the seed coating company. And the seed coating company, another element, right, in that puzzle, right? We're going down the chain of removing barriers to even starting work with biology. That seed coating company says, this is our machine. We went to see them, right? This is our machine. And when we tried your product, these are the things that we noticed. And if we have to do these things, do these extra steps on farm, we will not have time to do it. And it's going to make it more expensive for the farmer, and it's going to be not economical for us. And so we had to work out, okay, if we work out these issues, then the mobile seed coating company can actually do it, and they can have a profit out of it. Meaning now there's an element beyond the farmer in the system, another player in the system that is actually economically tied to using biology in a way that that benefits the farmer and themselves. So our evolution has always been to, first of all, enable farmers to work with living biology, and then simply plug into that system which already exists without upsetting it, without saying we're just going to make completely new equipment and all the farmers will have to sell their old equipment and buy new equipment. We're just trying to see how we can tweak the system to be able to do that. And then beyond just the evolution of how do we enable farmers to use biology, we have to look at, well, what is the biology actually capable of achieving? And the kind of biology that we work with, what is it capable of achieving? There is a certain limit of, there's a certain goal of yield, for instance, and the farmers want to achieve that yield. And we have noticed that the biology can push certain things, but it cannot compete with straight brute force applications of nutrition, of synthetic nutrition. And so we had to start looking at what else is out there to be able to support the biology and support the crop. So I'm going to stop here because you probably want to step in with some questions before I bore your audience to death, and we can move on from here. But as you can see, we've started with a simple message of let's use biology, and then we go to the point where we're interacting with a lot of different players in the system, and then we started looking beyond this biology thing.
Yeah, I really enjoy this. I think when we start to look, and you explained it so well at the beginning, there's so many different layers, so many complexities, so many steps within the system that need to change. So there are multiple solutions, and the angle that you're taking, I can see how it can apply to lots and lots and lots of farmers, because instead of them needing to re-educate themselves very deeply, you are making those very deliberate efforts to say, how do we meet you where you're at? How do we make something that you can understand, that you have the capacity, the knowledge, and the equipment to just plug it into what you're already doing? And that does sound, very, very practical. I think it would be lovely to hear. So in my mind, the farm currently may be spraying from this machinery chemicals that are made in a laboratory, in a factory, that are made out of fossil fuels, that are there either to feed, kind of from a chemical point of view, feed the plants, or kill life in control of the crop that they're after. So that might be kill the weeds or kill the pests, but it's kind of like a spray of death. And what you're creating is, right, well, just create an alternative to that. You do the same activity, but you're spraying life, and you're feeding and balancing the system through the biology itself. Is that a good summary, or am I coming at that from the wrong angle?
Yeah, I think yes, it is spot on. We're trying to use the same equipment. We're trying to use the same equipment so that we upset the cart as little as possible. So we're trying to fit into the equipment side of things and into the budget side of things. And as long as we can achieve the same goals as the chemicals we're achieving, maybe the number of applications or the when we're actually applying certain things changes throughout the growing season, but the overall effect of a good abundant crop that's good quality, that can go and be sold at a good price, that's still achieved. So So yeah, so in terms of the just touching on that description that you just made, that they're going to be putting out certain things that might be killing. The way I see modern agriculture is that you have a field. You have a field where all of the crops are pretty much fed through drip feed. Sorry, and then they're being given drugs to prevent disease. That reminds me more of a patient in a hospital bed. And what we want is a school of healthy plants. So these students, these young plants, they need good school lunches, nice and healthy school lunches, and not just drugs to make sure that they don't. Nobody in the school is running around with an IV in the side of their arm, right? So somewhere there became this disconnect between how nature evolved and what we're trying to actually do with it. And the truth is that the industry is going further in that direction, not trying to address that, but it's actually going further in that direction. If you think about after we left the European Union, one of the celebrations was, oh yes, we can now do directed plant breeding, or targeted plant breeding, as they call it. Nobody says that this is basically playing with genes, right? So, and in the past, majority of that has been not to the benefit of us. It was to the benefit of the salesmen of glyphosate, for instance, right? Because the plants were less susceptible to glyphosate, which means that you could pour more of it to control the weeds. And so, we're talking more about, okay, well, this plant is not very efficient. We're going to make it more efficient through plant breeding. Let's make photosynthesis more efficient. And I'd say, sure, why not? But I think we're still missing the trick. And I think still there are resources that are just not being utilized, even within the UK. I'm not even talking worldwide. And those resources could enable us to have the same thing that we're getting now, but just without the side effects that we're experiencing.
It's such a powerful thing when you look after the plant in the natural way, and all of this microbiology. It's achieving so many of the stages that the farmers are otherwise having to pay to control. Do you have, and this is probably a really challenging question, but I'll see how it goes. Do you have a resource that you would like to recommend? Dr. Elaine Ingham, obviously such a wonderful guru in this space and probably well known by many of the people in the audience. But if people are new to the idea of what Soil Life is doing and how it's supporting the plants, do you have a resource that you would recommend to people to take a look at, to learn more?
Probably for the general audience, the books by Jeff Lowenfeld's Teaming with Microbes would be a good start. So Teaming with Microbes is a book. There's, I think, the foreword, or one of the sort of sentences in the front of the book, is actually also written by Elaine. So they're all very well connected, and Jeff did a very good job with summarizing the role of the soil food web and individual elements in that soil food web. So I think that might be a good start. And if you're nerdy, if you really want to start diving deeper, what you could literally do is go on Google Scholar, and the paper, if you're interested in Elaine's work, in Dr. Ingham's work, the paper that you want to look up is the Ecological Monograph, and that's from 1986. And there's a sea of literature out there, and a lot of recent papers are actually very good as well. Again, if you're nerdy in understanding how biology works and what benefits there are of working with nature. And just very quickly, if you want to start even thinking in this direction, it's worth thinking about evolution, because that's how we got to the point where we're here now. And the really poignant way of looking at this is plants, terrestrial plants. They've been evolving for, I don't know, somewhere between 400 and 600 million years. And that's a long time, right? But microbes had 1.5 billion years of head start. And so when plants started evolving, microbes already were established. And so plants basically had to figure out, well, how do we work with this microbial soup? And the very early examples of that are obviously lichens, where you've got this algae and fungi collaboration, and from there, it's evolved further. And when you look back in that ecological history, it's easy for us to think that the planet always looked like this. Oh, we've got trees. We've cut down too many forests, because forests, they've always been on the planet. The thing is that 400 million years ago, trees were about 1 meter tall. And there were fungi with fruiting bodies that were 10 meters tall. And there is proof of that. There is a fossil found in Saudi Arabia, which proves that there were fruiting bodies of fungi the size of trees. And so there was obviously a switch, in terms of who's winning, just because how everything evolved. But the truth of the matter is still that plants have to work with microbes in a natural ecosystem to be able to get majority of the resources, including water, actually. There's the symbiotic relationships with mycorrhizal fungi and dark septate fungi, or mycorrhizal, I believe is the same thing. Means that plants actually have got lots more roots than just their own roots. And so they get all sorts of nutrition, but literally also water through the fungi. And so if we start thinking in this way, then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing in modern agricultural systems, which forces us to put all those synthetic nutrients and stopping ourselves from getting any benefit of these interactions that plants have evolved with.
Amazing. It is such a fascinating topic. So I'll make sure that there's links available to those resources, the book that you mentioned. But I love your vision there. That evolutionary part is so beautiful, and such a wonderful thing to connect in with. The thought of small trees and huge mushrooms. It's quite a vision. With the products that you're creating for the sprayers, you're obviously making a lot of compost. Is there anything special about that, and how do you gain all of the materials to put into it and create it?
So we've strategically located ourselves at a green waste composting site. And the fact that green waste composting sites exist, first of all, is good news. Second of all, doesn't mean that you automatically get great biological compost. So we have to amend our processes, and in general, we follow this modified Berkeley composting method, which is a hot composting method. And this is something that Elaine has been helping to popularize across the world. There are very many different ways of getting good biology in compost. It's just that this method is usually the fastest to achieve that high density of microbes that we're after. There are easier methods as well. There are more convenient methods for home gardeners as well. This is just the one that we use. And in terms of materials, we do use a lot of waste wood because we get a lot of wood that comes in here. But we actually these days, for green materials, we usually use hay that was locally sourced. And then the really interesting part of our local circular economy is that we use a lot of spent coffee grains. And we're still surprised how little of the coffee waste that goes through cafeterias across the country is actually used in gardens or for purposes like ours. And a lot of it still ends up in landfill. So, if you've got a local cafeteria and you've got your own garden or allotment, just go and ask them, leave a bucket, come and pick it up, because they probably actually put it into their waste bin. And it's a fantastic resource. It's for compost, for biology, actually, from the biology perspective, it's a fantastic resource. So there you go. That's a £350,000 tip for you to utilize.
It's a fantastic tip, and yeah, it just goes to show that we have the materials we need, because gosh, just think of a place that doesn't serve coffee. I think that it's something that any city, any community is going to have a good resource, a good supply of coffee grinds. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. And I think if I could ask you for one final tip that you can offer to people, what I've been asking in this season of the podcast is if you can think of something to share that people can take action on today, a small step that you would recommend people to take to support regeneration in the world.
This is a loaded question. It's a fun one because it's easy to follow this. Like we want to be responsible, right? We're responsible individuals, and so it's easy to get trapped by individuals. It's easy to get trapped in one camp or the other. One camp is going to be, I don't care at all. I'm just going to use my green bin for everything, or I'm going to use my black bin or whatever bin you're using, right? Or I'm going to take responsibility for everything. I'm going to live zero waste. I'm going to, I don't know, go vegan. I'm going to ride the train, right? That's because, there's a lot of information that comes our way, and it's easy to get swayed one way or the other. It's before I answer your question of what people can actually do, I really wanted to make this point, because it's not the first time that the industry is simply putting responsibility on us. Yes, we're the beneficiaries of the civilization. I think we're lucky, we're privileged that we live in this world. We've got roofs over our heads. The roofs are quite strong. Winds don't necessarily blow them off very easily. We've got food on the table. The food is safe to eat. We've got water that's drinking water in our taps. In the UK, by the way, it's something that apparently it's not a thing across the world, right? So you can drink straight from the tap. So the thing is that we're very privileged that we live in this civilization that allows us to have these privileges. Now, on the other hand, you can name apparently 70 or 71 companies that have made the most money from pretty much climate change. And I think there's not enough action there's not enough pressure being put on these individual companies to actually do something about this. And so my point and my message to your listeners is that do whatever you can, but please don't take the blame, okay? Because you were born into the system, unless you're one of those people working for certain companies, okay? And even when you're working for these companies, you're usually a line person, somewhere, in the office or somewhere, doing the job, and you have to pay your bills and you have to feed your family. So please don't feel bad about, this world and how you're living, in the first place. Because these companies are very good at PR. And if you look at our history of the 20th century, especially, the two best examples that we've got that everybody accepts these days, everybody accepts these days, that's tobacco. That is being sold as a very safe treat, okay? And there's nothing wrong with it. And my doctor prescribes Marlboro, right? But the one that people, for instance, are not necessarily the best, informed about is plastic, is single-use plastic. plastic manufacturers. Plastic, by the way, is a fantastic resource. It's a fantastic material. It's a human miracle of engineering. Okay, so it's not a bad thing, plastic in its own. But the thing that happened was plastic is too good for its manufacturers, for the business, because it lasted 1,000 years, right? We know that. And so what they did was let's make plastic a single-use item, and that shift actually created huge profits for the plastic industry, right? And by the way, by extension, to the oil and gas industry, because that's where plastic comes from. So it created huge profits for the plastic industry by making it a single-use item. And then, well, people are people, they're not necessarily, we didn't evolve with plastic single use. We evolved with paper. This is lignin. Lignin already has got microbes that can decompose it. So we just throw it on the side of the road and it is gone within days. With plastic, we can't just throw it on the side of the road and think the same is going to happen. It's not, right? So then what did these companies do? Right? Instead of taking responsibility for what they just did and created, this whole problem of creating a huge mountain of plastic, they took their profits and they said, that is your fault because you're littering. Okay? And suddenly all of the pressure went off of their backs. And so it's very important to me that we don't get trapped, especially people who are empathetic, people usually leaning to the left. They're very empathetic. And they're like, oh my goodness, it's like mea culpa, it's all on me, and it's really the wrong thinking. Okay. Now, to answer your question, yes, you can do stuff. You can do stuff on many different levels. If you've got a garden, please reuse your scraps. The simplest ways to reuse your scraps is to dig a hole. You dig a hole, make sure that hole actually doesn't have any standing water so that it infiltrates. But dig a hole alongside, the plant of row of plants. It could be just bushes of roses or something. But dig a hole. It might be a sort of like a trench, and you put your scraps in there. Cover it up so that rodents don't have an easy access to it, and that will start to degrade. If you've got space for composting, start to learn to compost. And then if that is a barrier, there are potentially local community projects that already start to look at that, to reuse your food scraps. And then if you want to go a bit further, and maybe you still don't have a collection of your food scraps, for instance, then talk to your local council. Local councillors have open days. Talk to them. The thing is that there are companies out there who rely on those food scraps to produce methane, for instance, for biogas, which is a more renewable way of producing energy, right? So you can talk to your councillor too and make sure that you've got those collections, because these companies really rely on these councils to make the contracts available. So you can do that. And then, beyond that, you would need to go into big business, I think, unless you've got access to the government, and to your MP or something. But it's hard for me to tell you, for instance, go and buy organic, because it's usually more expensive. And so I don't tell you that. My vision is that we enable farmers to grow without all of these chemicals so that organic becomes the normal. That's what I want. Okay. I don't want you to be, I'm going to be choosing with my wallet. No, it doesn't work like that, because organic food doesn't always cost the same to produce as conventional. That's not always, but could. Okay. It's the marketers that do it to you. It's the marketers that say, oh, this is special. You're not going to get sick. You're going to get sick with everything else, but this is better. So we're going to charge you more, okay? Masanobu Fukuoka said it long ago, that when he saw that a shop in Tokyo was charging 2.5 times the normal price of food for his produce, he pulled it from those shelves, because food is a human right. And, we shouldn't have simply a privilege for the very rich to say, I only eat organic or biodynamic. It's a selection, it's not the way to do it. Seriously, we have to have good food. We're not supposed to be the tip, okay? And if you knew what I knew, maybe for a future conversation, what could happen actually in agriculture where we become the tip, you would understand why I'm saying that it's not about the wallet.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate such a well-rounded answer. That is absolutely what we're all about, taking the holistic look and not kind of tickling on the surface. And if I could offer a tip to people from my point of view, if people are feeling so called to explore these ideas further and get excited about soil microbiology and all of the creative possibilities that are happening with Soil Ecology Lab, how do they learn more? And I'm going to send them to just go and have a little look.
Thank you very much for that. We do have we actually made a retail brand for products that you can simply buy and use. You can find them at soilsmiths.co.uk. But if you're very, very, very curious, twice a year we run courses, and they're aimed for anybody from a garden scale to a farmer. And you can learn how to use the microscope. You can learn how to make compost. You can even learn how to make extracts out of it, and you can even learn. That's pretty advanced, though. That's beyond sort of like an own garden thing, but advanced plant nutrition as well. So that's at soilecologylab.co.uk. You can find all of that there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking with you and learning more, and best of luck with everything.
Super. Thank you very much, Helen. Pleasure is all mine. All the best to your listeners and to you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check the description for the links to learn more and engage with the work from Daniel and Soil Ecology Laboratory. You'll find a range of resources there, including links to Daniel's products, recommended reading, and some additional We Are Carbon episodes for digging deeper into this topic of soil. Don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date. I'm Helen Fisher. This is We Are Carbon. And let's keep figuring this all out together.